Yeah. So, I mean, you even write about how that culture of, starving yourself and overworking yourself, and obviously body image is across the world, across, genders and everything. But you talk about even how like Kerry Washington felt that, the famous Kerry Washington, and kind of like not so much of an overlap between maybe the people you were covering and the people who do the actual work. You write about clothing as like a sense of ownership, a chance to have control. And I think you wrote something like, I wasn't necessarily loving cashmere on the skin. What is the allure of, maybe it's too generic of a question. What's the allure of just of looking good, of having the right clothing, of being in season, all of that, especially for you?
I thought about this today because I wore a uniform for most of my life, but
Mm,
I went when I was looking for prom dresses, I was like, I want a vintage one because I did not want anyone to have the same dress as me. And
there you
even though
go.
I looked physically different from my classmates because I had to wear the same thing as them day in, day out, I thought it was
Mm,
really serious when I got to like make that choice on my own. So I'm like, that's when I started vintage shopping when I was in high school
mm,
because I wanted to find things that no one else could have.
okay.
Um, and I think it made me feel really powerful. When Rihanna was accepting her CFDA award, she said, I always loved clothes because I said, like, this is how I'm going to compete. This girl
Mm.
might be able to beat me, but she cannot beat my outfit. And yeah, of course, like it is superficial, but all superficial things have real meaning if we
Mm,
let them.
yeah.
And for me, I liked the power that like clothing gave me in other areas where I felt like I wasn't very powerful or people
Mm,
didn't really respect me or listen to me. But I knew that if I became an authority in
mm.
fashion, that I would get that respect and they would listen to me. And they did.
You write about how you took fashion theory. Was that your major, or was that like a class?
That was my major that I made up.
Haha, nice. Would you, I mean, whether it was in that major or otherwise, like, I mean, is there a lot to be said for like clothing as like creativity and like an outlet of like, in the same way as so and so is an artist visually? I mean, is it a
Mhm.
type of art? Is that, am I overgeneralizing that?
Well, in the academic sense, fashion theory is really about the evolution of the ability for individuals to choose their clothing and like the
Mm,
implications of what that means for like the wider culture.
dang.
So, for example, when we lived in like feudal times,
Hmm.
um, where we had like systems of kingdoms, like the king would get the best things, and then like his court would get like second best things. And then like the bourgeoisie would get like the third best things. And then like lastly, the peasants.
Hmm.
And you would not be able to transcend. You cannot be a peasant and go to be a king.
Mm,
You can't just dress different. Like
sure.
you can't. You literally can't.
Hmm.
And if you look at the American system, like similarly, like there were things that like slaves were able to wear that masters would never wear. And so
Mm,
the slave could never wear the master's clothing ever, never, never, never. But with the democratization of fashion in after the Industrial Revolution and the way that we outsource clothing production means that now you could be broke and you can go dress like a king if you want to.
hmm.
There's nothing to stop you from doing that, but it doesn't necessarily indicate your status, your
Sure.
place in the world, your education level. It doesn't mean anything like that anymore. So now we have to assign different meanings to it. And the way that we do that is by aligning you with like a political affiliation or a subculture. So
Okay.
punks dress a certain way and quote unquote preppies dress a different way.
Hmm.
And you can kind of make inferences about what people believe and what they want to align themselves with
Hmm.
based on how you're interpreting their clothing.
Wow, thank you for that. I want to take your class. I want to take your class, professor. Man, that makes a lot of sense. I know obviously you're summarizing, but that there's a lot of interesting things there. when you're
Yeah.
talking about like going to school, like prep school in Connecticut, and then you talk about some of like the Gossip Girl type, people you knew like in some of the magazines and stuff.
Mhm.
Um, did you? And then you were just talking about something right now just brought up, but did you go to school with people who use the word summer as a verb? Like I'm gonna go summer on Cape Cod. I'm gonna go summer on the Hamptons.
No, but they definitely did
Okay.
summer.
Yeah, right. Okay.
You
Boat
know?
shoes. That's I think I was thinking of boat shoes and preppies. That's what brought it up.
Yeah,
Okay.
like everybody had a summer house. Everybody
Yeah.
had somewhere to go in the summer and also in the winter.
That's awesome. That's funny. Oh man. A lot of Florida probably, right? In the summer or in
Yes,
the
a lot of
winter.
a lot of West Palm Beach, Palm Beach.
Uh-huh.
Hmm.
Uh-huh. They can be neighbors with what's his name, the orange guy, anyways.
Yeah.
Oh man. So speaking of college, there's a part that really was really interesting to me and really profound. You talked about taking a course like a Western bodies and Western civilization, something like that. And like the question was, if you could, would you swap bodies with someone? You're like, yeah. And
Mm.
you said mostly everyone was like, no. And you're
Oh
like,
yeah,
oh,
that was a yeah, Western feminism.
what's your family?
And yes, the question was like, you would switch bodies with anybody, like would you? And I was like, absolutely. And I think the only person in the class who was like, absolutely. And everybody else like gave these like great answers about like, I trust my body, like, and I'm like, what? We're 19, like we have barely lived
Yeah. A,
somewhere else.
a lot of the, I mean, it's a great thing to aspire to, right? But I'm with you, right? I mean, a lot of them had to have been lying, right?
I don't know. I think they
Man.
genuinely like I was so surprised, and
Yeah.
I would realize though that I had severed kind of like my connection to my body and my
Mm,
ability to think of it as a sacred vessel because I
right.
was so punishing to it.
Yeah.
Like I didn't want to respond to my body's natural needs. Like if I was hungry, I wanted to turn it off. Even if I had to pee, I'm like, no, I don't even want to do that right now.
Uh,
Turning it off. Like I'm like, that's not good. But
no.
over time, if you do that a lot, it makes you very
It's
disconnected.
hardwired, right?
Disconnected. Yeah.
Hmm. Well, yeah, and so as you talk about becoming more and more successful, more known in the industries as a writer, as part of the fashion world, getting invited to all the big shows and knowing the big people, a little you were shouting out seeing Jay-Z and Beyonce as the last guests.
Mhm.
You were like the greeter kind of thing. Did you
Yeah.
any conversation with them that do you happen to remember that night
Oh,
other
other than
than
like
to the right?
welcome and hello, like that's
All
it.
right. But I wonder like how the pressures, I mean, we all have our internal pressures. I mean, obviously, body dysmorphia, that's not the right term, but just, we all have our issues with body, of course. And just how that kind of related to you, like as you're going up and up in the fashion world and seeing, what are in the magazine pages, what's on the internet pages and stuff, like how that kind of led you to maybe, you talk about kind of a pretty intense diet that you had. I mean, diet's not even the word, right? With the doctor, is it Pressler?
Pastor, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm kind of rambling here, but just like connections between, working in that world where, got to fit in that dress, got to fit this person in that dress, and who's on the covers, and then kind of like, and as well as you being like a public facing person.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that there is sometimes like a really big disconnect for people who work in magazines and produce these kind of images
Mm-hmm.
to see their responsibility in making sure that they alter what the beauty standard is, like
Mm.
realizing that they actually have the power to do that. So meaning that like there are fashion designers who are women who are plus size or who are short, and yet you only see 6'2", size 0
Right. Right.
17-year-olds walk down their runway. Or like even as like they get older, I'm like, where are the older models? Like I talk to college age girls all the time, or like younger age girls, and they're just like, wait, that's what 34 looks like? They're like, oh my God. I'm like, what do you think happened? They're like, I don't know. And I was like, yeah, because
Yeah.
they never see it.
Sure.
They don't see that you can like, I'm like, what do you guys think happens to us? I'm like, but that is like a disservice from Hollywood. It's a disservice in the fashion
Yeah.
industry. Like
Same.
to not accurately reflect the wide breadth of women that exist,
Mm-hmm.
and size wise, like, and that becomes like really problematic and really limiting. So sometimes people, will get in to positions and then not even be, I mean, and this happened to me too. Like when I worked at certain magazines, like I would want to feature Black women and the boss above me was like, no, that's not right. So if someone, who is really a bigger decision holder than you are, a bigger stakeholder than you are, is like, that's not what we're going with, there's not really a lot that you can do, but it ends up being so destructive to the audience who then receives those messages that you're responsible for putting out.
Yeah, I mean, the things that are so great about this book is like, I mean, we know what it means when we say systemic or systematic, but you really describe like what that means for, for a Black woman to speak up in whatever way, in the ways that you were talking about. And like, you'll be labeled as troublesome, you'll be labeled, and that Tracy Ellis Ross example you gave was a great one about like the extra labor just to get to that movie or that TV show, right?
Yeah.
And just again, to talk about, okay, we know body image is an issue and we need to do better with the phobias, we need to do better with representation, but to read your personal story makes it 10 times more, you can help us to remember those things more, for sure. I'll never, going back to the idea of like the middle-aged fashion designer or the 5'2" one, I'll never get over the idea of like the overweight man who hasn't exercised in so long, and he's just saying, man, that guy sucks, the basketball player or the football player.
Yeah.
Right, the guy who's in the best physical shape as possible. And again, that's not to body shame the other person, it's just like, how do we expect this other person to be perfect, and in that way? So oh man, as the book goes on, you get into the specific jobs you have, and again, people who've experienced racism will often say, right, that like whether it's a microaggression or not, it's racism. But some were more in your face than others, and so sorry to read the one about Stewart, right? One of the parties you're at, and he was just drunk, and I'm sure he probably would have explained it away as, oh, I was just drinking and all of that. But just incredibly problematic, and you can understand why that would be so taxing on your mental health and everything like that. When you worked at BET, you were able to not be the token Black girl, right? You talked about a lot of great things that happened there. But it seems like politics is politics everywhere. I don't mean politics like Republican, Democrat, right? But like there's always allegiances, right, and rivalries and the whole deal. I just wonder, like, kind of overall in the fashion industry, what you learned about how it's different from mainstream society, regular society, and maybe it's not.
I mean, it's a lot like high school if you went to an
There you
all-girls
go. There you go. There you go. All boys school here, but we had all girls schools with our sister schools. Yeah.
It's a lot of psychological warfare. I think that's what it is. Yeah. A lot of like Survivor, outlast, outplay.
Shoot. Yeah. Right. Well, I mean, I don't. Again, it's hard to oversimplify, but like all the things, all the ills of society, racism, homophobia, sexism, internalized sexism, misogyny, all the above. I mean, you write about those. I wish you didn't have to write about them. I wish they weren't true, but you write about them so well. And without giving away some of the ending, there is, I'm not gonna say it's a happy ending, because you described how you like everyone is still a work in progress, but you're able to find some peace kind of from the industry and from some of the toxicities. I really, really appreciate how honest you are in the book.
Thank you.
Right? I mean, there's something, if you were to just, what's so great about the book is that it's about you, but it's also, points the camera, whatever the metaphor is, points the camera outside to society. But it would be easy for you to just be like, they. But I mean, almost like the last page or two, you even have like almost like bullet points of like, things that you wish would have gone differently.
Yeah.
What was that like and I'm glad that you've, found some happiness and a lot more happiness and relaxation and tranquility from those toxic places. What would you kind of say to people who are in toxic spaces, whether that's work, whether that's in their own lives, like whether it's about therapy, formal or not, and kind of what you've learned, like as you've gotten older, and again, you're very young, you still have many, many years, but just like what you kind of, I guess kind of what you would have told like 18-year-old you or 21-year-old you.
Well, therapy definitely helps.
Agreed.
Um,
Agreed.
and I would say that my therapist helped me really understand like what a self-love practice meant and what it is. And I think I had a very commodified concept of
Mm.
self-love, primarily because I worked in magazines. So we spent a lot of time telling people like, oh, go on vacation, get massages, like buy the bag, like that's self-care.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you love yourself. Like that's how
Mm-hmm.
you treat yourself. Like,
Mm.
but it's like, it's ultimately very empty if you don't have self-compassion and forgiveness, which is like how I was able to be so honest in the book, because I recognize like I can't love myself without accepting these parts of me, and like I have to stop trying to hide them and put them away because it's ugly or because it is not, presenting this perfect picture. Like
Mm.
recognizing all parts of yourself like need to be worked on but need to be loved. And I'm like, yeah,
Mm.
I did that thing. And I think a lot of people could benefit from, developing those ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And I would also say that what makes this easier is knowing that it's not an individual problem, and it's not,
Yeah.
there's not a solution that an individual can come up with to systemic issues. Like,
Mm-hmm.
of course, like there are things that we can do. But had I been this kind of like revolutionary as an 18-year-old working at Nylon as an intern, like I would have never gotten an assistant job. I would have never gotten an editor job. And I would never become a director.
Mm-hmm.
Like there are very real consequences for how you have to go about your pursuit of power. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think giving yourself a break as well for being like, oh, like I should have said something different here. I should have did something different here. Like actually, like you are not at fault for someone being racist toward you. Like
Mm.
it's not some way that you have to react that would change it. They will still have that opinion whether or not you say the perfect thing.
Mm.
And likely like they don't want to engage in debate with you, so like even starting it is probably silly.
Right.
So understanding that and having like compassion for like the times when like you didn't know
Mm-hmm.
or you couldn't say, I
Mm-hmm.
think is also like really critical to being able to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Man, very well said. There, like I said, it's one thing to read about it like in a magazine or whatever, or to just hear about it in kind of a cold-blooded way. But
Mhm.
yours is personal. I mean, towards the end of the book, you talk a lot of throughout the book, but towards the end of the book, like, these you say, yes, there's been change in the fashion industry, but these things are still there, all right? I mean, the idea you talk about like a commodification, and obviously in magazine writing and writing, you want to use the perfect words. But I was so struck by like the vagueness of the language. You write about like, oh, well, I guess this one's not vague, but like no ethnic people or looked for, or those kind of things are just brutal. But things like, oh, it's not our look,
Mm-hmm.
right? And your book makes it clear. You say it's not our look. You wash your hands of it. Oh, it's not. I'm not racist. It's just it's just not
Yeah.
our look. And
Mm-hmm.
then if that's said 100 times and 1,000 times, it becomes the accepted norm, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll end with two questions for you. One, I'd love to hear some of the really cool feedback you've gotten from the book, and two, if you want to talk about any future projects you got coming up.
Sure. Okay. Um, the response to the book has been incredible. I was pretty convinced that other people were having incredibly similar experiences.
Hmm.
But sometimes it shocks me like how similar our experiences could
Uh,
be.
yeah.
And it's interesting because again, like it's just not talked about. Like you're taught, like it's not polite, you don't bring it up. So
Hmm.
you don't even know like what's safe. And so when one person like opens the doorway to that, like it has been
Okay,
really amazing.
that's awesome.
Um, and as for future projects, I'm working on a fiction book right now. That's
Nice.
actually what I wanted to write the whole time, but this book had
Mm.
to come out first, like because I was having so many issues, like learning to be a fiction writer because I spent all of my career like doing features
Sure.
and teleporting. And so I was like, I don't know how to like build a world by myself. And so it was really challenging for me. But now that I know I can write a book, I know I can write a fiction
Oh,
book.
heck yeah. Nice. Oh man, looking forward to that. And again, want to thank you so much. The book is so good. You
Thank
talking
you.
about how it was finished in 2021, and it's like I feel like this book, books have so much of a shelf life, pardon the pun. Like your book can be read in 3 years and it can be read differently, but also this, you know what I mean? I just feel like there's so much more to be gleaned from the book, even for readers, and someone's going to discover it in 7 years and it's still going to hit home. So congratulations. And I know it's not easy in pandemic times to publish a book, but um, with very much critically acclaimed and fan acclaimed, and rightfully so. Thanks for sharing your rationale and for the background. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks for having me.
Been an absolute pleasure. Wish you great luck with everything you do in the future.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to episode 171 with Danielle Prescod. You can now subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, and please leave a 5-star review. You can also ask for it by name using Alexa and find it on Stitcher, Spotify, and on Amazon Music. Follow me on Instagram where I'm at Chills at Will Podcast, or on Twitter where I'm at Chills at Will PO1, the number 1. You can watch this and other episodes on YouTube. Watch and subscribe to the Chills at Will podcast channel. Danielle, I'm so bad at this. I always forget. Can you shout out your Instagram, your social media, your contact info, if you'd like?
Oh, sure. I'm at Danielle Prescod, Prescod on Instagram, and at Danielle Prescod on Twitter as well, and at Danielle Prescod 7 on TikTok.
Oh, TikTok, nice. Any particular places you recommend to buy the book, or is it all good?
It's all good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it's surprised. I don't really even know what bookstores it's in. It's in McNally Jackson in New York. It's at Barnes and Nobles. It's available on Amazon, bookshop.org.
Okay.
At some local stores in New Orleans as well. But like, I don't even, sometimes people will send me pictures of it. I'm like, oh, I didn't know it was there. So that's amazing.
Cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. And please, folks, sign up now for the Chills at Will podcast Patreon. It can be found at patreon.com/Chills at Will podcast Peter Real. My last name is Riehl. Check out the page that describes the benefits of a Patreon membership, including cool swag and bonus episodes. Thanks in advance for supporting my one-man show, my DIY podcast, and my extensive reading, research, editing, and promoting to keep this independent podcast pumping out high-quality content. This is a passion project of mine, a DIY operation, and I'd love for your help in promoting what I'm convinced is a unique and spirited look at an often ignored art form. The intro song for the Chills at Will podcast is Wind Down Instrumental, and the other song played on the episode is Hoops Instrumental by Matt Whitehour, and both songs are used through archesaudio.com. Please tune in for episode 172 with Robert Lopez. He's author of 3 novels, including Cambi Bolongo Mean River, named one of 25 important books of the decade by HTML giant, All Back Full, and A Novel and Stories, A Better Class of People, and we will discuss his newest book, which is called Dispatches from Puerto Nowhere. This episode will air on March 24th. For now, thanks again for listening, and I hope that these uncertain days bring you texts by writers with mad skills like Danielle Prescod, whose work, like Token Black Girl, gives you chills at will.